Hey everyone, welcome to the College Football Rundown. I'm Woj.
I'm Walt.
You can follow us on Twitter at WWCFB. Our website is collegefootballrundown.com. Make sure to check us out there. You can sign up for our newsletters, which will send out through email, and they'll inform you of what's to come on this episode, what we did covered last week, and just a reminder in time of when we'll be on and when our show goes live. Again, those times are 8 o'clock on Friday, every Friday at 8 o'clock. So first off this week, I want to talk about some big games from last week. The one, on everybody's mind right now would be the Notre Dame-Florida State game. It was a pretty wild game, slow first half, exciting second half by, both teams. And then obviously the play at the end that everybody's been talking about now for quite some, since Saturday, which may have been illegal or not illegal. We'll talk about that a little bit coming up. But just to start off the game, Notre Dame came out really strong. Outgained Florida State on the ground, 115 yards to 19 in the first half. Just was the dominant force, controlling the game on the ground, controlling the pace of the game. But then in third down conversions played a big part in that too. Notre Dame was 6 of 12, where Florida State was 0 for 4 in the first half, which was a huge for Notre Dame just to keep the ball moving. Second half came around though, and Jameis Winston turned on the Rockets.
Jameis Winston. Everybody's talking about Jameis Winston from that game. I'm talking about Everett Golson. I was talking about him before the game started last week, and I'm still talking about him today. Jameis Winston played a good game. He's moved himself back into the Heisman talk, which we're actually going to go over a little later this episode, right, Woj?
Right.
We're going to give our Heisman picks, but he's moved himself back into the Heisman talk at least, and he did bring Florida State back. They ended up winning the game according to the score, so I will give him credit for his team winning that game.
All right. Well, you can't deny Jameis Winston. Second half, 15 of 16 for 181 yards. Basically brought them back into the game on his shoulders. And like you said, he did bring himself back into the Heisman race, probably with that second half showing there.
Well, it definitely wasn't the first half, because what did you say he was in the first half? 15 of 16 passing? Is that what you just said?
Yeah.
Well, now you have to look at the whole game passing. He was 23 of 31 in the whole game. Now, those aren't great stats if you look at the whole game. So that just tells you how much better he did the second half than the first half.
Yeah, he found a way to win, and again, that's what Florida State's been doing kind of all year, no matter who the opponent was, essentially. So
no, and Notre Dame, if you looked at, again, we're kind of concentrating on the stats here. Let's do that. If you look at Notre Dame stats, they were better across the board than Florida State's if we look at the whole game. Again, you mentioned the second half, Florida State did a little better, but if we want to look at the whole game, Notre Dame played better than Florida State on paper.
Yeah, definitely. So there was a penalty called at the end of the game, an offensive pass interference, which Notre Dame ended up catching what would have been the game-winning touchdown. CJ Procise was in the slot and a trip wide, and he threw a run block essentially into the corner. And this was past the 5 yards of allowed contact, and the defender was not contacting him by any means. He did throw a straight run block, and in my opinion, that was a penalty. FSU did tell the refs at halftime that they had done this in the game prior, and they did it in the first half of their game. They just said, watch out for it in the second half. Now, here comes my beef with it. I do think it was deliberate offensive pass interference. People look at the play and it was just a screen, but the guy actually had his shoulder down, head down. The receiver had his shoulder down, head down. CJ Procise we're talking about, and he was doing a straight run block for multiple yards. So in my opinion, it was a penalty, but here's the thing. For them not to have called that in the first half and then have it called it then, that's where I get my beef from it. I think it was the right call in the end, but you have to be consistent when you're doing that stuff. And Notre Dame, you thought it was a good enough play, a legal enough play, because they didn't call it before, and it just wasn't at the end of the game there.
Well, I'm going to have to agree with that completely. No matter whether it was the right call or wrong call, you're 100% right. They've already set a precedent. We've talked about this a number of times on our show. They'd set a precedent for that game. They weren't going to call that. They call it in the end now. Everyone always says, one penalty doesn't, decide a game. Well, You watch that game and you tell me that one penalty didn't decide that game.
Yeah.
Because they set that precedent. They decided to change their precedent at the end and ended up hurting Notre Dame. Obviously, they tried for it again once they had the penalty, and they were unsuccessful the second time they tried for it, and they lost the game because of it.
Yeah. It was just a big letdown for Notre Dame. I know Brian Kelly had a quote. What did he talk about as far as that game goes?
Well, what he said is his exact words I'll give you. We execute that play every day, and we do it legally, and that's the way we coach it. We don't coach illegal plays. And now you had said you thought it was an illegal play. It should have been called the first time and the second time, but they didn't do that. I'm going to disagree with that because when I look at that play, what I see is a bump and run coverage. It may have been past 5 yards, but the defender was going up in a bump and run coverage. Now, if you're in a bump and run coverage, you're going to make contact with the offender. It's completely legal. Obviously, everyone knows there's nothing wrong with that. If you want to run straight and you're a wide receiver and they're bump and run coverage you run straight, that should not be a penalty. Now, if you guys obviously were on the audio only here, you're not going to be able to see this play, but I'd ask you to go watch that play again and look at the bump and run coverage they play and how the receiver just ran straight. Would you agree or not agree that he never had his hands? There was no holding. He never had his hands around him.
There was no holding, but it was more about his body impacting the defender.
Pick.
He was, yes, it looked like a deliberate run block, like I talked about. Like the receiver was setting up to do a complete run block. He had his shoulder down, head down, and just running into the defender. And I think that would be more illegal. I think there's legal ways to do this play. Like you said, there's bump and run coverage. There's ways to do that. You can keep your hands up. You can make sure that doesn't happen. But when you drop that shoulder and you drop that head to go make a block like that, I think that's just going a little bit over the top. And I don't think that they teach that at all. I think they teach, a legal screen where he keeps his hands up, he gets into the 5-yard bump and cover run, and he tries to confuse the defender. And that's what a good play would do there. I think CJ Procise just went a little bit overboard with the blocking there, and
and you could say too. I'm not going to change my opinion. I'm going to keep my opinion. You're going to keep yours, and everybody's going to keep theirs. But you could say that Kelly made a bad call calling that play because you never want to put the game in the official's hands. In the back of his mind, he knows a little bit that they could be calling this for a pick or something like that. You never want to put the end of the game in the official's hands, and I think you could kind of blame Kelly a little bit for this, although I do think it was the wrong call on the field.
Yeah, possibly. But nevertheless, Notre Dame ended up losing that game. Florida State continues to go on as an undefeated team. Notre Dame, it's going to be a tough road back into the Final Four if they're going to do it. They're going to have to win out. Definitely, they have to play USC and Washington, I think, still coming up. Two big Pac-12 teams with really good defenses. So one with a good offense, one with a really good defense. So we'll see what happens for them on their way to the Final Four. We'll probably get a better picture once we get the rankings, which come out next week from the playoff selection committee, so the actual rankings. Some other notable games from last week. Bama destroyed A&M, 59-0. Did just a job over Texas A&M. Just keeps showing that Texas A&M keeps getting blown out by these other schools. They're not that good. They had that really good game against South Carolina at the beginning of the year, and so far since then have done not much of anything against their other SEC opponents. So another one was the Kansas State-Oklahoma game, 31-30. Kansas State ended up winning that. Was a pretty wild game all the way around. Kansas State had it had a pretty good lead, and then they just kept throwing it away here and there. But a couple things from that game: Glenn Gronkowski had the tight end for Kansas State had a 62-yard TD pass, and that's Rob Gronkowski's brother, the Patriots tight end. I guess there's a little, you bragging rights now because Rob never had that long of a touchdown pass ever in his career in college.
Well, I think that Glenn has a little ways to go before he can be comparing himself. But yeah, I guess that's something between their family members they could talk about.
Some big things from that game though is Kansas State blocked an extra point early in the fourth to make it 31-30, and that's where we ended at. That blocked extra point was huge. And then Oklahoma ran it 3 straight times within the 5 and couldn't score, which was another big thing in the fourth quarter. They go to the kicker, Michael Hancutt, who already had missed one in the game before at 32. So this was from 19 at the end of the game there. And straight pull, in golf we call it a just straight pull hook, because this was not going anywhere near the goalpost. It was just a really bad kick. I feel bad for the guy because that's what people remember is just the kicker losing the game for him, with the blocked extra point, the missed field goal from 32, and then the missed field goal that was just really bad from 19. So not a good game from him, but Kansas State ended up pulling it off over Oklahoma. Oklahoma now 2 losses within the Big 12. So it's a tough road for them. I think they're out of the Final Four, even if they win the Big 12 championship for sure, even if they get there at this point. So,
there's no question. They have no chance at this point, and they lost it for themselves. Luckily for the playoff committee, they don't even have to decide them anymore, put them into consideration.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you. You had a little off week last week. Well, I shouldn't say off week. You didn't get to sit down and gavel over all the late games last week. You got to go to a game last week.
I was at that Upper Iowa game, and it was a long drive over there. I should say, not up there. I always say up there, but it's a long drive over there. Luckily, I had my Sirius radio in there, so I was able to listen to all the games. But like you said, the game was at night, so I missed some of those night games. But it was well worth it. Upper Iowa, let me tell you, that is a nice facility. They just redid that last year. Their turf, amazing. They have a huge new Jumbotron in that field.
Yeah.
It puts some of these, FBS schools to shame. I remember I went to NIU. Their screen is nowhere near comparison to this Upper Iowa screen. Their field nowhere near comparison to this Upper Iowa field. It really was astonishing. I've obviously never been there before. It was my first time, and they did just remodel it last year. So that's part of the situation there. But even the on-field play, it was great to watch. It's a little different than you would see in the FBS. There's bad things and good things about it.
A lot more passing, isn't there?
There's a lot more passing. I could imagine in other games. This game specifically, it was pretty balanced. Winona State ended up winning, actually. They won 38-19, unfortunately, but they took the lead early, so they started running the ball, obviously, to kill the clock for most of the game. But it was still interesting to watch. Unfortunately for Upper Iowa, Chris Smith, one of the top 3 running backs in the nation in that D2, he was hurt, so he couldn't play. That's their starting running back for Upper Iowa. My cousin, though, man, he had a great game again. 8 total tackles, 6 were solo, and one of those was a sack.
Nice.
Yeah, it's fun to watch him, man. He takes on these linemen, these 300-pound linemen. I don't know if they're that big, maybe 280-pound linemen. He just runs through them. He likes to hurt people.
Has he gotten a haircut yet?
No, he hasn't gotten a haircut. He's still got that hippie hair. I don't know why he keeps it either, but it was real nice. So it's a little different than FBS. We got to go on the field after the game was over. You get to meet all the players literally right after the game's over, take pictures with them. So I do have a picture with that hippie and his long hair. It was worth it, though. That was a great trip. I enjoyed it a lot.
Great. Well, we do have a question from the website. If you ever want to go give us a question or talk about something with us, you can go onto the website. There's a button you click. You can send us a question or just audio it over your computer, and we'll get it and try to help you out on air with whatever you're going over. But we did have a question. The question was, which GoPro model would you guys recommend for college football tailgating? Well, GoPro, I don't know much about them. I know the Hero 3 Pro is a solid GoPro unit. I know Kyle knows more about this than I do.
Oh, I'd agree with your Hero 3 Pro because that's actually the camcorder I have. I use that one. I think it's a great camera. It shoots at 1080p, which is full HD, and it's at 60 frames per second, which is one of the best things you're going to see for a camera that size. But big thing for tailgating, you're going to be taking a lot of photos too, along with that video, because you don't want to get that high resolution photo. It's really good at taking photos. It takes 10 megapixel photos up to 10 frames per second, so you can really get some burst shots, they call them. You can get a lot of those, snap, 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 real quick, and they're really high quality. I would highly recommend that. But if you do get that GoPro, the Hero 3 Pro, make sure you get a good micro SD card, a class 10 or above. That's going to allow you to do those burst photos and have even better quality. Again, that's the same one I have. That's the one I'd recommend. I know you said you'd recommend that too. They have some newer ones out like the Hero 4 Black, which is, it's a little better. It has 4K resolution. I'm sure everybody here has heard of that. It's the new thing coming out, the new HD. But I don't know much about that one. It just came out. It's a little more pricey, but Hero 3 Pro for the money, bang for your buck, I'd get that one. It works well for tailgates too. But do be careful. You cannot bring those in the stadium. If you bring them in the stadium, they will take them from you, or they will make you take them back to your car, and then you have to come back in. So be careful not to take them into the stadium.
Yeah, we also had a second part to that question. It was also, would Woj win in a race against a 1974 Honda C50 or Z50 mini bike? I did have an encounter with a 1974 Honda Z50 mini bike before.
It's quite a coincidence.
I did have sandals on at that moment in time, so I did not win. But if you guys don't know what the 1974 Honda C50 mini bike is, it's got a 49cc engine in it. Max speed's about 25 miles per hour. It's got a 3-speed automatic transmission. I mean, if I had shoes on, catch it in between those speeds, I think I got it. I mean, top speed at 25, I can at least push, 15. It depends on how long the race is, too, but I think I can pull it off.
Well, yeah, it can't be a long race. That wouldn't be a fair competition, no matter what vehicle you're racing. But I'd love to see this rematch.
Yeah.
And again, we never mentioned this. We got to give a big shout out. This comes from T. Diddy, our buddy Tom. Asked us this question, but no, we got to get a rematch of this, Woj. I think maybe if you had shoes on, maybe you could do a lot better than you did before. You're not going to beat it. I'll disagree with that.
I don't know. We'll see. Well, some games coming up for this week. We have a couple big marquee games, and then some ones to watch that are under the radar that Kyle wants to go over. The first one I do want to talk about is the Ole Miss LSU game, though. Got the Land Sharks going to the Valley. So it's going to be a tough matchup in Death Valley for Ole Miss. It's going to be a test on the road. Again, Ole Miss is 7-0, ranked third right now. LSU 6-2 with 24th in the rankings. This is going to be at 6:15 on ESPN Central Time. A couple things I want to go over, and this almost looks one-sided for Ole Miss, and it is on defense. And I'm going to say that because they call it the Land Sharks. They call themselves the Land Sharks. They're going to attack, and they're going to attack hard. 97.1 rushing yards per game, ranks 8th in the nation. 193 passing yards allowed per game, ranks 20th in the nation. 10.6 points per game, ranks 1st in the nation. I mean, they just have an incredible defense. 20 takeaways on the year, 5 from fumbles, 15 from interceptions, which is tied for the nation's lead. Sanguiz Golson, which is one of their D-backs, is getting an interception per game on average, which is impressive. Marquise Haynes is one of their freshman linemen, their outside linebacker. 6.5 sacks on the year. So they have a strong defense, athletic defense, and when I'm looking at LSU and I'm looking at the questions they've had with quarterback, with Anthony Jennings and Brandon Harris, Jennings is again going to start, but they've had so many questions at quarterback they can't, complete anything through the air successfully. They beat Kentucky 41-3 last week, 303 rushing yards though. They didn't pass it much. I actually had Anthony Jennings on my fantasy team last week, because I saw that they were playing Kentucky, but he still couldn't produce the fantasy points just because they don't go to the air enough. They don't have that connection, I guess, with their wide receivers. I think the key for them is going to be giving the ball to Tevin Darrell, which is one of their best wide receivers. Anthony Jennings is going to have to find him, and Anthony Jennings is going to have to protect the ball. Again, you're going up against one of the strongest secondary, if not the strongest secondary in college football, and you're not going to be able to run it against this team because they are so stout up front, even with the young guys they have. So, I mean, Fortnette and Hillard are going to be shut down for pretty much the entire game. Anthony Jennings is going to have to air it out and make some room for those guys. I think that's the only way they have a chance at winning this game. I think Ole Miss comes into LSU and Death Valley and just tears them apart.
I completely agree. I'm so happy you said that, because I know earlier in the year you were a little bigger on LSU. I'm glad you're starting to see my side. They are garbage. Do not bet on them. They're getting 3.5 points this week. 3.5 points. That's it. If you want to make some money, you go out and you bet on Ole Miss. They're going to beat them by more than 3.5 points. I think you and I both know that. But I really did enjoy that part where you said that the Land Sharks are going to the Death Valley. I hope that ESPN steals that from us and talks about it on game day, because that's pretty creative if you ask me.
Yeah. USC, Utah. Another good game. We got USC ranked 20th. They're 5-2. And Utah 5-1. They're 19. So it's pretty close there for those two teams. That's going to be on 9 o'clock on Fox. This game is going to be interesting. Utah more known for their defense. USC more known for their offense. It's going to be interesting how, Cody Kessler works himself into this game and how well he does on offense, knowing how, potent this defense is. Here's a couple stats for that Utah D. Six players. They have 6 players in the top 100 for sacks in
That's
college
amazing.
football. 6 players.
How many players do you have on defense? I think it's 11, right?
I know. It's unbelievable. Nate Orchard on their team, 10.5 sacks in the year. Hunter Dismark, 5.5 sacks in the year. Utah is first in sacks with 33 sacks, 5.5 per game, to give a net of a negative 194 yards to the other team. That's an impressive line.
That is incredible. I would have never thought of that.
So if Cody Kessler doesn't get sacked 5 times this game, they might win, but it's going to be a tough brute. The thing about it is they are so fun to watch in defense because they are so physical. You watch like their linebacker Jared Norris. I just want everybody to go into that game, watch that linebacker. I think his number is 44. He is so physical when it gets to the ball. He doesn't even care, if they've already got the first down or what, if it's the smallest tackle or not. He's going to dive you into the ground. You're going to be tasting mud by the time you're done with that play. He is such a physical linebacker. It's really fun to watch. Utah struggles, though, on the other end of the ball. They've had issues at quarterback. Travis Wilson's going to start for them at quarterback this game. He's had the reins passed back and forth between their backup quarterback, but they're ranked 99th in pass offense, only generating about 191 yards per game. Not that good.
No, that's not real great. And one thing we're not bringing up, too, and people might not even think of this, but last week they played Oregon State, and obviously they went into double overtime. Double overtime, that's like playing almost, a game and a half.
Yeah.
Their players might be beat up a little, and that is not going to help your passing game when your offensive line is beat up. So.
And you're ranked 99th in pass offense when you're playing teams like Idaho State, Fresno State, Michigan, Washington State, which neither of those teams, those 4 teams right there, have anything to do with offense or defense whatsoever. Those are offensive teams all around. So if you can't put up numbers against those teams, then you're definitely not going to put up good numbers against USC. But Steve Sarkisian has got that up-tempo pro-style offense for USC. It's been working so far. They had those 2 losses, but it's a really big pass run offense that is quick, very up-tempo, kind of like an Oregon, but they're more of that pro-style set. So they're going to sit in the pocket. They're going to run they're going to run you up the middle. They're going to sit in the pocket, do short passes, and they're going to do it quickly. It's kind of the difference between Oregon, where they're going to do quick, but they're going to do more of the option. They're going to go to the outsides. They're not going to run up the middle. They're going to be more athletic on you. Whereas USC's got a little bit bigger bodies. They're going to try to just bowl you over. Jarvis Allen and Justin Davis are 2 of the running backs that are going to get the ball a lot in this game, I think, and they're going to try to just beat up that line. I don't think you want to pass it too many times against that Utah pass rush, but. Should be an interesting game. Just see where Utah is in that Pac-12 race right now, and maybe if USC can make a run for the conference championship as well. So, be nice to see that game.
Yeah, that'll be a good game to watch. Again, you mentioned not too much to watch this week. There's always college football to watch. We both know that. Not those premier games, but a game I did want to bring up: Big 12, Oklahoma State, West Virginia. That's a near pick'em game. That'll be a close game. Good game to watch. And then also, if you want to watch some offense, Arizona, Washington State, they're playing this weekend. Can you believe that?
It's going to be a big offensive game right there.
It's going to be a huge one. I'm going to love it, too. Now, Anu Solomon, my quarterback fantasy, Connor Holiday, obviously, my quarterback fantasy, they're going against each other. All they do is pass the ball. They're primetime performers. Going to be a lot of offense in that game. If you like to watch offense, which, I'm not really that kind of guy, but I know a lot of people are, Arizona, Washington State, definitely a game to watch.
Yeah. Heisman predictions. We're about that time. About 5 weeks to go here. It's coming down to a tighter knit race. Who do you have in your top of the list? Who do you think is going to be, or what do you think is going to be Heisman this year?
Well, this is the thing. Am I going to pick my guy by how it should be picked and how the Heisman says it should be picked, or am I going to pick my guy by how it actually is done? Because if you look at the Heisman, they call it their mission statement. What they believe a Heisman winner is, I'll quote them exactly: the Heisman Memorial Trophy, annually recognizes the outstanding college football player whose performance best exhibits the pursuit of excellence with integrity. Winners epitomize great ability combined with diligence, perseverance, and hard work. Now, if you go by that, I know one person that's out, Jameis Winston. He's gone.
Yeah.
You can't put him in there. And
No.
in my opinion, I think he deserves to be in there because of the way the Heisman actually goes. But I'm going to ignore that garbage because that's not how the Heisman's picked. That's never how the Heisman's been picked. I think it's by the best player in college football that is the most valuable for his team. And that's how I believe most people pick it, and that's how I'm going to pick it. So I'm going to say Dak Prescott.
Okay.
That's my guy.
I mean, and I would say the same too when you do it by those terms. You're talking about a guy that's on a team that's undefeated right now, who's played extremely well all year, dominant in most cases. The team's got a good defense. He lights up that offense. But I'm going to go a different route. I'm going to go by numbers. And I'm going to go Marcus Mariota. I think yes, they do have a loss in their record. And I don't think it's because of him. I think he did everything in that game he could have to win it. But here's some numbers for you. Number 1 passer efficiency rating at 191, which is really good. He has 0 interceptions on the season, even though he's been sacked 18 times. And he's got a 70.2% completion rating.
That is impressive.
Those numbers right there are extremely impressive. By far, blows all the other quarterbacks right now in college football away just by statistics. But again, it's not all about that. It's about your team winning. Now, if they make it into the playoff, I think he's a shoo-in for Heisman, pending that Prescott not winning the national championship.
Yeah, you put those two against each other, it doesn't matter who wins that game, national championship. Dak Prescott's going to come out with that Heisman. Again, I think great quarterback, Marcus Mariota, by the numbers, great quarterback. Obviously, great pocket presence. I think his scheme on the team, the way Oregon runs their offense, definitely helps him get those stats. And I do think, after listening to that, 0 interceptions in the season, that helps your team a lot. And maybe you do put him up there. I don't think he's over Dak Prescott at this point, though. That's what I'd have to say at this point in the season.
Some other news around college football is about the playoff selection committee. Archie Manning is out. He was one of these committee members kind of in charge of the points for ACC and the Mountain West. He kind of looked over those conferences and helped other committee members see some points on certain teams that they were talking about in the top 25. He will be out for the selection committee this year. They will not replace him as of now, and they hope to have him back for next year. He was having knee surgery, and he'll be rehabbing for that through the rest of the college football season. So,
yeah, it's pretty crazy if you ask me that they're not going to replace him. Again, it's kind of late to replace him, but now that you're stuck with 12 people, that's an even number of people. The way the selection committee is going to work, it probably won't influence anything. We kind of went over, was it last week we went over how it's going to work?
Yeah.
I think it was last week. It's probably not going to influence having that even number of people, but really whenever you're doing something like that, you want an odd number of people. And I think he made the right decision. He's not going to be able to put his full heart into it and full intention towards that, picking those teams, but it's still going to hurt the playoff committee as a whole.
You know what? I forgot to mention something when we were in that Heisman, or even throughout this entire broadcast, is we didn't get to talk about Marshall at all.
Oh, Cato. Is that what you're thinking of?
Yeah. So I want Rakeem Cato. Tell me about it. This guy is wild.
He's a senior quarterback, and the thing is, if you're going to put him in there, you're kind of considering past seasons because he's been good throughout his career. He's just been unreal. This season, he has 1,912 passing yards, 19 touchdowns. Not to mention his team is 7-0. They're undefeated.
Yeah, and he just got the NCAA record for not the NCAA record, the bowl division record, the subdivision record. For 39 straight games, he threw a touchdown. Beat Russell Wilson, held that record at 28. Yep. So great quarterback, and Marshall might make it into the Final Four. We'll never see. The schedule as it's coming up is they should win out, and they should win the Conference USA championship game. I mean, maybe and we'll get to that now. Is me and Kyle were talking before the broadcast went up, and there's really only one spot you have to think of in the playoff right now in that top four. Mm-hmm. You look at Florida State; they're almost a shoo-in. Yep. Just what they have left, they might lose the ACC championship, but who knows? But they're almost a shoo-in essentially at this point. Then you look at the SEC, and you just look at how dominant Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Georgia, I say Georgia there because they're in the eastern bracket of that SEC, whereas the West is the powerhouse bracket, and then Georgia's on the east side. They're going to have to play in the SEC championship no matter what. Now they're a shoo-in for that, so they could win that game against, say, Mississippi State or Ole Miss, and possibly get bumped in. What my thinking is here is there's going to be the ACC team. You're going to have your Florida State. There's going to be 2 SEC teams. And there's going to be 1 Pac-12 team if Oregon runs the table. Oregon would be the only team in that list. I think otherwise a Big Ten team gets in over a Pac-12. If Oregon runs the table and wins the Pac-12, it'll be Oregon, Florida State. You'll either have Ole Miss or Georgia and Mississippi State. I think no matter what, Mississippi State beats the Ole Miss game or beats Ole Miss in that game and then goes on and, say, either loses to Georgia, that means Georgia gets in, or beats Georgia, that means Ole Miss gets in. So there's your 2 SEC teams. So again, Oregon, Florida State, Ole Miss, or Georgia, and Mississippi State.
I'll agree with that. I'm going to make one change, obviously, but I'll keep that. I'll keep Florida State. I'm going to keep Mississippi State. I think they're going to be in it. And I'm going to keep either Ole Miss or Georgia. So we're kind of exactly on the same lines. And I do want to say, too, I cannot wait for that Ole Miss-Mississippi State game at the end of the season.
I think it's the national championship. In my mind, it's the national championship.
It probably should be. And it's a shame we even have a postseason because that game could just be, you know how they used to have it when they just had the AP polls decide it? This year, that could work perfect. But obviously, that's the way it's not going to be. That's not the way it's going to be, excuse me. So I'm going to put in for my 4th team rather than you had Oregon. I'm going to go to the Big Ten. I'm going to put in Ohio State.
And I think that's a valid option. If Oregon doesn't run the table, I think a Big Ten team gets in. But if an Oregon runs the table, Michigan State's definitely not going to get in, and whoever else wins Ohio State, there's no way. But again, this is that spot for either the Pac-12 champion, the Big 12 champion, the Big 10, or Conference USA champion, Marshall, who's going to be undefeated possibly. That's going to be the tough decision for that selection committee to pick from. I think 2 SEC teams get in automatically, and I think an ACC team in Florida State's going to be in.
Yep.
So it all comes down to that last spot. Who's going to be in that 4th spot? It's going to be interesting. But again, like you said, that Ole Miss Mississippi State game, last game of the season for the SEC, is going to be awesome. That is the national championship in my mind. I hope they're both undefeated to that point. I think it's just going to be a wild, fantastic game. Both really good defenses, one a little bit better than the other, and then both good offenses, one being better than the other. It's going to be awesome.
It will be. We'll be glued to the TV, and the rest of America will be glued to the TV come that day, too. So.
Yeah, definitely. Well, everybody, thanks for listening in to the College Football Rundown. Again, you can catch us on Twitter at WWCFB, and then our website is collegefootballrundown.com. Make sure to submit any questions you have. We'll try to get them on air as much as we can, or any suggestions for a segment that you guys want to listen to. I'm Woj.
I'm Walt.
And we're out.